Now, this next item is going to take a little explaining. Technology used to help find Osama bin Laden is now being used to help keep cakes fresher for longer. And this is the point where I get someone to help me exactly why and how. First of all, let me quickly say hello to Joe Wheatley, winner of the Great British Bake Off, who's going to be with us in just a moment. But first of all, let's speak to Stephen Marshall from the University of Strathclyde, live with us from Glasgow, and an expert in the hyperspectral imaging that we're talking about. Stephen, let's first of all concentrate on the efforts to catch Osama bin Laden. What role did the imaging play in that?
Okay, well, hyperspectral imaging is able to capture much more detail on every pixel than a normal digital camera. It collects an entire spectrum for every pixel. So hyperspectral imaging from an aircraft can look down at the Earth and is able to see rivers and roads and tanks, and is able to form a picture of what's going on the ground. And that's the technology that was used to pursue and capture Osama bin Laden.
So where do cakes come into it?
Well, the same technology on a larger scale, on a smaller scale, can be used in a commercial application, such as in baking, where the camera then looks down at baked products such as sponge cakes, and it's able to determine things like the moisture content and the fat and the sugar content, and how that is changing over a period of time as the cake gradually gets older and gets staler.
And as you're talking, we're seeing an image of a hyperspectral image of a cake. Looks a bit like a Mark Rothko painting, doesn't it, Joe? Now, does this help us to know when baked cakes are going off, or does it actually help us to bake them better as well?
Well, possibly. I should think it does. For me, I think that, you know, the whole bake thing is that you get some luscious, gorgeous cake out of the oven and it's fresh and, you know, delightful. But certainly commercially, I can see where it could be really useful to know, you know, how long a cake, you know, that it could actually potentially last longer and stay fresher without too many additives in it. So it sounds, you know, like a really good idea.
Because after all, and you can see that we've really laid things on for you here. We've gone into the BBC budget to get a few cupcakes in, but you know, people like eating fresh cupcakes like these, but actually the reality is that a lot of the cakes we buy are off the shelves in supermarkets and designed to last for a long time, and we can't really escape from the fact that the food industry has to provide that for us.
Yeah, you do certainly need preservatives. I mean, certainly, for me, when the boys were younger, my children, I liked to bake because it always used to worry me that a loaf of bread could last a week in the cupboard, you know. Whereas if you're baking fresh, then you know exactly what's gone in there. But certainly, you know, for this technology could be amazing, really. Could give potential for home bakers to, you know a format for baking cakes at home to last longer. So I think it could be a really good thing.
All right, and Stephen, let me bring you back in. If this were to be successfully applied in the food industry, is this a case of a cake being able to sit on the shelves for a lot longer, or for us just to understand when it's still at its optimum taste point?
No, it means that we're providing more information to the bakers, who can then improve and perfect their recipes in order to make the cakes last longer. Therefore, they can also it means you get less waste, because we're not going to throw them away, and also it means that they can be transported for longer distances and expand the market of the baker.
All of this is making me think of Heston Blumenthal, one of the most famous chefs in the UK, and he's famous for applying science to his cooking, isn't he? I mean, to you, is producing cakes like this, is it an art or is it a science?
I think it's a little bit of both. I think there is a science to baking because, you know, it isn't like cooking where you can just chuck everything in and, you know, go by flavour. There is definitely a science to baking, and actually, you know, that is true. If we knew when a cake and how we could make it last longer, there would be less waste, because there's such a worry now that things are going off, and I think there's so much food waste that potentially that could be, you know,
But about
amazing.
your cooking, you're just worried about what it tastes like, aren't you? You're not worried about whether it will stay in the cupboard for the next 2 weeks.
It never stays in the cupboard for that long. It's always, you know, they're always gone. But commercially, if you was baking for a coffee shop, or, you know, if you was baking it for you know, lots of people ask me how long in advance they can bake things for, then potentially that could be amazing,
And Stephen, in Glasgow, if this works for cakes, are there other foods where it would also work for?
Yes, we're also already working with Quality Meat Scotland, looking at cattle as soon as they're slaughtered, looking at the red meat, the raw meat, and we're able to determine from that how tender the meat is going to be by looking at its properties, because it's quite difficult to predict if how the quality of steak at the time it's slaughtered, whereby looking at the fat and the protein content, we're able to make a prediction of which will be the tender cuts of the meat.
Very good to speak to you, Stephen. Joe, thank you very much indeed for coming into the Global Studio. I'm going to leave it to you to distribute these lovely cakes to all of our crew here at the BBC. Now, do stay with us here on